Welcome back to codingcat.dev, where we give you cats the freshest dose of dev snacks. Brought to you by Cloudinary, build faster with AI-powered image and video APIs. Welcome back, peeps, to codingcat.dev podcast. I have Mohammad with me today. What's going on, Mohammad?
Good. It's good. It was a shiny, sunny morning today. We always love that in Sweden. However, that's rare, but still, a good day. How about you?
Yeah, it's kind of similar. Sweden and Michigan kind of flow a little bit the same way. So usually we get a lot of clouds in the winter, but I think they keep telling me we have an El Nino. I always mix it up, but we have a warm winter that's occurring. So it's kind of historically warm around here and sunny as well, which has been quite nice, I think.
I bet. Yeah.
The irony is we have plans once my son graduates in like 3 years to move to Florida, and I keep saying, well, the way it keeps heating up, maybe we should just stay here. I don't know. So we'll have to see.
Exactly.
So in this podcast, we're going to talk all about the Angular Cookbook, the second edition that Mohammad released. But first, I want to get to know a little bit more about you and kind of your journey to this point. Do you mind breaking down how you got started in development?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Pakistan, and I'm from the city Karachi, which is considered a tech hub of the whole country. So it used to be one of the greatest cities in the world decades ago, but it has degraded its value. But still, I think it's still one of the country's most revenue generating city. So
that's interesting. Like, what is there more behind that? Like, do you know why it has kind of downgraded from that?
I think, or I know that what the sentiment is for from the perspective of how the city is handled is that nobody who comes into authority really owns it or tries to solve the problem. And since it's the hub, a lot of people from a lot of villages basically come to the city, and then obviously they earn money. They are part of the revenue cycle as well. But the city has not been developed to sort of support all of that, and the city is now not horizontally scaling but rather vertically with the same infrastructure that was like years ago. So that's why there are a lot of problems when it comes to the city being livable with good quality, and I think that's where we are struggling, but still it is still one of the highest revenue generating cities of the country.
I of course had to Google it while we were chatting, and it says Karachi collects 35% of Pakistan's tax revenue and generates approximately 25% of the entire GDP. That's pretty incredible.
Exactly.
Sorry, I interrupted you. So yeah, continue.
No problem at all. So I used to live quite far from the city center. So I am a what do you call a small town boy. And I used to travel a lot, even for colleges, university. I think one trip of one side would be 1.5 to 2.5 hours. And I loved to go to colleges and the university. I never skipped any classes just because I wanted to be there, and it was super fun. And I think it's not really common in Pakistan as much as it is in the West, or maybe in the Europe per se. For example, here in Sweden, 7 o'clock the shops start to shut down, or 8 o'clock. In Pakistan, if you're roaming around even at 2 a.m. at night, you'll see food, you'll see all the shops open. It's all bright and lightened, so to say. So yeah, I'm from a small town which was quite similar to everything shut down at 7, very little shops and whatnot. But that town, and the town's name is Steel Town. It's where one of the biggest sort of steel mills of Pakistan is situated. My father was an employee there, and the town had 99.99 literacy rate. So there were a lot of people who would just go out from the town to study, and I was fortunate enough to be there. So I graduated, and I did my computer science, and I was kind of the kid who did not like any subjects that were not programming related at all. So business communications, history, whatever you name them, I would just get barely passing marks, but I was always interested in the coding subjects, and I was also a student who would just do things at the last moment, but would still score better than the others sometimes. Exactly. So yeah, I started from there. I was fortunate enough that one of the one of the teachers who I was a really favorite student of, they recommended me to one of the alumni who were looking for great developers. And we were sort of standing out. So we were 12 people who actually got selected for an interview. And we got the interview, and then we cleared that. And I was part of a company quite sudden, and it was really unexpected. But I think that's where my actual journey started. And you know what is interesting? It was in 2013, June, and my first day at my job was to see what this new thing called Angular is, and then teach my seniors who were working on Flash back then. And we had a bunch of applications that we had to convert from Flash to HTML5, including some things similar to Google Drive, things similar to even PDF readers that came in. And PDF.js was just launched by Mozilla back then. So we were actually building a product
Oh,
out of that. So it was a product based company. So I started there. I soon grew as a senior software engineer. I started, I think, just 2 years in my career. I started leading teams of 2 to 3 engineers. I got really fascinated by Angular and the power of it. Just because there was jQuery back then, and I knockout JS, and there were so many things going on. But I really, really loved how I could. I still remember when I went to the Angular site, I could just type something right in the site, and I did not have to bind any event listeners on anything at all. But then magically there was a two-way data binding, and I was fascinated by that. And that's how I started. I started sort of facing some problems. I started really small on sort of contributing to submitting issues. And I also created a video for my channel as well, or did it during live stream, that when I showed that I think at least 8 or 9 of my first pull requests were rejected completely by the maintainers, and majority of them were my fault, because some of them actually asked me some questions like, "Hey, can you please add test to it?" And I did not respond because I was really busy with my work, or was too lazy. So that
sure.
never really happened. So I started from there, and then eventually created some libraries, got into open source, got into giving some talks. I was fortunate enough to work for a really incredible person named Mashood. He was the second Google developers expert from Pakistan. So I worked directly under him as an employee. And then he told me that he was applying for this thing called GDE, and I got really interested on what that is. Do you think I can be one? And he said, "Well, right now, when I look at you, I don't think so. So you need to build up your portfolio. You need to do some activities. Show something that actually makes you an expert." And that was a really good advice. I really admired that, and I worked on it quite hard. I gave a few talks, prepared something. I ended up creating this thing called NGX device detector, which is right now one of the very famous libraries for Angular. We recently crossed, I think, 10 million downloads, and
Incredible.
only on GitHub, I think we have about 4,500 projects using the library. So that's an amazing thing, that how a lot of people can come together and then build something, and I can be a part of it. That was really, really amazing. So that's how I started, and I think there have been just two different moments when I have shouted quite a lot with happiness, and one of them was getting the email of Google Developers Expert, and I was really, really happy. That was about, I think, 6 years ago, when I first became a Google Developers Expert. Yeah, and then it took it from there. I then came to Sweden for a company called Klarna. I continued what I was doing, that because yes, that's what GD is supposed to do, to continue being an expert, to share knowledge.
I have to ask,
Eventually,
like,
yeah.
timeline-wise, I think Angular 2 came out in 2016. Was the Angular GDE program, was that in that time frame, or were
Uh,
you able to be a GDE prior to Angular 2?
No, no, no. I think it was in 2018 in April when
Okay.
I got the email, because I remember myself being, I think, when the GDE spark for me triggered for an ngconf extended event that was happening in one of the universities in Karachi, and I was there barely as an attendee, and I was seeing John Papa, Dan Wallin, all the amazing speakers. I still love them, and then there was a break, and then everybody was given a task to do, and that was something really small, but I was among the audience, and I was able to do it quite fast, and then I raised my hand like, "Hey, I did it," and the person who was on the deck, he actually invited me on the stage, and he was like, "Okay, show how you did that." And he was a person who actually took an interview of me for his company back then, so he sort of knew me. But then when I showed that and people applauded, that was a really interesting moment for me.
That's cool.
And that's when you see that, like, backtrack it, you see all the dots connecting. That was the conference in which Mashood, the second JD, saw me for the first time. And 2 years later, he approached me. And then, that the conference that I'm talking about, the NGCon, that was when Angular 2 was just barely announced, and it was
Wow.
in the
Wow.
alpha mode. And I remember the documentation saying the root component is the root component. I was like, okay, cool. But that's when it happened. So to answer your question, it was a while after.
That's really cool. I think the last time I talked with John Papa, he had suggested he was kind of getting burned out and wanted to just like buy a vineyard or something and like retire with his wife. I was like, oh, interesting. So
Interesting.
don't be afraid of following your passions, folks, outside of all these tech careers. It's kind of
absolutely.
Sorry. So I think at some point in there, just after that, you took a position and you actually moved to Sweden, to Stockholm.
Yes. So right after working with Mashood for a couple of months, I got approached by a company named Klarna that I think grew in the US quite a lot as well. But it's one of the unicorns in Sweden. So they asked me to relocate and join the team, and I came to Sweden to see. Was pretty much shocked because I've never traveled outside before then. And I was astonished to see that it was 10 p.m. and the sun was still up there. It was in the summers. And we really liked what we see. I came with my wife to see how Sweden looks like. It felt like a really good choice. So I was hired by Klarna. And then, we moved here, and we have been here for the past 4 years now.
Nice. When you're at Klarna, you did some work in Redux as well, right?
Yeah, a lot of Klarna was basically a lot of React and React Native. So I worked both on the iOS and Android platform. So if anyone uses Klarna and they sort of add an item to their wish list, I was behind the wish list team and also the price drop notifications that you usually get.
It's always fun to find the people like behind those little features that are all over the place. It's awesome.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think that somewhat brings folks into like the mind, the stratosphere of learning about you. And I think we'll take a quick ad break so we can pay some bills, and then we'll come back and chat more about your book that's released.
Sure.
Bring it back.
Cloudinary allows you to remove any unwanted backgrounds, so you can reuse assets efficiently. You can also erase objects and people from images for placement in new experiences. For more engaging content, easily turn static images into dynamic animations, and rely on smart cropping to always deliver assets with a focus on the most relevant objects to your brand. Cloudinary Programmable Media. Build faster with AI-powered image and video APIs.
Thank you, Cloudinary. Really appreciate the sponsorship and also for hosting all of our images all these years. It's been awesome to be part of that. Okay, so we learned a little bit more about Mohammad and his past and kind of how his career transitioned and moved from Pakistan over to Sweden. And now we're going to dive into his book, which I'll show off real quick here. So this is the Angular Cookbook, but the cool thing here, which I should have mentioned this before. I totally missed this. But when I was traveling in Singapore for, I can't remember the event name. Anyways, this is where I met Mohammad, and we were sitting at a table, and I like just drops this book on the middle. And I'm like, what is this? It's like, I wrote this. I'm like, are you kidding me? I have to have you on the podcast. And that's how we ultimately linked up. Do you remember the name of that? It was like content creator.
Yeah, it was Google Developers, Creators, and Online Communities Summit.
Yeah, geez,
really hard to remember,
name.
but
I know, I can never remember. Yes. That's awesome. So the book that he dropped in front of me is this one here, Angular Cookbook. Break down, like, why did you write the first version? How did you like start this idea? Where did you come up with it?
Absolutely. So I had worked with this publisher called Pact before, and we worked on an Ionic video course that started really well. But then Ionic got a competitor, React Native, and then it slowly became not so popular. But then they reached out to me with an idea of an Angular cookbook, and then they asked me if I could provide an outline. And while I was researching quite a lot of things, I could figure out there are a lot of topics that an Angular developer usually needs, and myself also, including in all of that. And that it drives from there that I started researching more on what people usually ask about, what do developers face, and it becomes really hard when you're a senior engineer to really see, what are those problems that freshers or beginners face. But I was fortunate enough to find those one way or another. I'll talk to a lot of great people, and then figured out, okay, this is the outline that I should have. And the idea was to give something that follows the pattern of how I think a lot of developers learn. That is by implementing something and seeing and figuring out if this works or not, rather than a lot of text. And that is the idea of the cookbook. So you start with the problem, you have an app already done, and then you follow the recipe, and then you come up to the solution, and then you read on how it actually works with minimal text possible. So yeah, that's how it started.
That's really cool. And as you kind of developed this thought and worked with Pact further, did you have other people like helping you out along the way, or like at least proofing and editing? How does the process of creating a book like that actually occur?
Yeah, I met some GD. I don't remember what was the name of him, but I met them in San Francisco in one of the Google events. But yeah, he basically brought his book and for giving away for free. And when we talked, I told him I created the video course, and he told me he wrote a book. And I was like, "Ooh, you're so cool! I want to be like you. I want to do a book. I think it's super hard." And he told me, "No, I want to create a video course. I think that's super hard. Writing a book is much smaller because you have people with you." And when I wrote the book, I figured out that is sort of the case, but it depends on how much practice you've had. So writing a book with the publishers and with Pact became really easy because I had people to work with, especially fixing those grammatical errors and sort of figuring those things out. Like this could be rephrased, or just having another eye and saying, "Okay, I've read this, but this doesn't make sense. Maybe we can phrase it better." Or what is this here that you're talking about?
Yeah.
So those sort of things that really helped me quite a lot, and small mistakes like wrong figure names or numbers in that case. So I got a lot of help with that regard. So the process looked like I would write a particular chapter, I would finish it, and then I would both publish the code for it, and then the text is provided to the reviewer. And then it goes through one proof checking or with grammatical checks, and then also one technical review as well. A person who basically runs the whole code and then makes sure that what is actually said in the book actually works. And that was really, really helpful because we could find a lot of things in that process. And even for the second book, that the person I worked with is also, I think, a GD. His name is Kiss Marcel, and really amazing guy. He also found out small things here and there that I could fix. So yeah, writing book with an editor that has those things really, really benefit me.
What about some of like the diagrams and things that are in the book? Are you creating those, or is that something that Pact helped out with?
In this case, they had the opportunity to provide me someone, but I decided to do it on my own. I was very picky, especially for the second edition. I was like, okay, no, I need to draw all the diagrams. I need to, and even after they proofread everything, I actually went through the book again, word by word, to see if I've not missed anything or if others have not missed anything. But yeah, they do have people who can help with diagrams as well.
I mean, some of the diagrams you have in here, like here, I'll bring up a quick little sample. Something like this, I mean, it is super detailed. Like when you talk about just the component input and output and things like that, and that kind of that two-way binding we talked about, to actually like illustrate that and let people understand that, I find it super hard to do and like complicated. So I love that you're able to break this down, but I can't imagine making all these images. It must have taken forever, right?
Yeah, we initially decided, or we thought that it would take maybe 6 months, but it ended up taking over 11 months to finish the whole thing.
So I think that like begs the question. Angular has kind of a roadmap of, every time they do an update, right? How are you handling, like, it takes 6 months or however long to write the book, but they're like moving ahead and going up a version. How are you handling that part of it?
Yeah, that was a tough one. But one of the things that I also, and I, to be honest, I really struggled with this. I also had multiple discussions with my wife, and I'm fortunate enough for her being there for supporting me and calming me down when I'm going towards those crazy questions. Because I was like, okay, now they have introduced, for example, signal. Should I just remove input and output? But the reality is that there are a lot of teams who probably will never migrate to 17 or are still working on a fixed version because of constraints, especially enterprises. And that actually led me to add the new stuff as an addition, but rather keeping all the existing stuff or most of it still there intact as core concepts. So one of the things that I did in the very beginning, and I think that has helped me a lot, and I thank Jeff Cross and everyone who has created NX for the tool. It's an absolute gem. I migrated all my previous projects, which were more than 80 projects, to NX, and that basically ended up in 2 workspaces. And now I have the luxury to upgrade Angular really easily whenever there's a new update. So that helped me quite a lot. Even though I was working and I was like, okay, the new version will add more things, I was still a bit safe that I will be able to migrate to them. And to be honest, one thing that also happened, that we had a difference of when we wanted to publish. So the date actually moved forward because of 17.2. We tried to catch up. We underestimated the time as well. But then when it came a bit closer, like in September, we decided that we're not going to publish it then, but we'll wait for 17 and then we'll publish in December. And that was what we did.
Nice. That still sounds super challenging to me. I mean, just the whole like print edition and like not being able to update something until like you go through those versions, that's got to be just hectic, and like everything in me would want to go, oh no, like this is not up to date, I need to go, and you just can't. So I can see where like book publishing can be both very like enriching, and like you have something that's a permanent like timestamp of something awesome that you did, but also super frustrating, and like you can't update that thing, so you have to release something new. So thanks for walking me through that. That's cool.
One of the things also, sorry, you wanted
No,
to
I
say
was just
something?
going to shout out Zach DeRose on the NX team. He had kind of a family tragedy recently, and we've had Zach on the show, friend of mine that I got to meet at NGConf and things. So hearts out with you, Zach. It's a hard thing to go through. So anyways, sorry, please continue.
Yeah, I hope everything gets better and he gets the strength and the family as well.
Yep.
Absolutely. One of the things that I wanted to also share is regarding the changes is I decided to not do all of the things before we submit, because that's not even possible.
Yeah.
And one of the things that actually spilled over even after publishing was that just yesterday or the day before yesterday, I've upgraded all the logos of Angular to the new one.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened. I ended up I created some sort of custom scaffolding application for the whole mono repository that allowed me to have the same header and the layout for all the applications that included the Angular logo. But now I have hard-coded logos in 80 projects, and that was not nice of me. I should have created a library back then and then maybe used a component, but I did not do that. And in the end, now just I had to create my own custom NX migration to replace all of that. But yeah, things like these were a really big challenge of things to keep up. And I think the last things that I could get in the book were signals. And I also thought about NGRX signal store, but I left it. And I was like, okay, it's going to be too much.
Yeah, it's at some point you have to like cut it off and kind of move on with what you're
Exactly.
putting into the book, which is, again, it's super challenging thing to do. What about like class-based components versus kind of the React style functional that Angular's starting to move towards? Any opinions on like if you write when you write your third version of this book, will that become more of a thing, do you think, or not?
That's an interesting proposition. I mean, I know the technical challenges that we have, but I also know the possibilities that we are talking about. I personally am the kind of person who likes to see things improve, and I don't stick with, for example, if I've used class component, I don't want to learn a new way of doing things. I still prefer, okay, if this is going to bring ease to me, I'm all up for it. And I think it's a really interesting proposition. I think it can solve a lot of gaps as well when it comes to people learning Angular, and that's what I really want to see going forward for making it easy for freshers.
Yeah, I almost love being able to like write in kind of a template and like by full component all in one file. But then as you start to grow, kind of understand, okay, you can break those up, you can make it class based. Here's directive, like start really small and like understand it and then kind of build from there. It seems like the right way to go.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
that's also like someone who's touched React and like writes React too. So like you get a little bit of that flavor in there. I don't know. It's interesting and challenging how to support these different front end frameworks. So it's cool.
Absolutely.
I think you brought with you a little bit of show and tell of the book. Do you want to share your screen and maybe show the folks a couple of the examples that you have in your cookbook?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet.
I will share my screen right now. And
perfect.
There we go. Awesome. So the code of the book is still open source, so you can find it on my GitHub, which is SNIRs, and you can find all the samples right here. And as far as I remember, it is supposed to be MIT license. Yes, it is. So I'm going to show you one of the recipes, which is of the deferred blocks. And that is also something I was able to get in right before publishing it.
Here's that fancy new Angular logo too.
Exactly. Yeah, that's after the migration. So all good now. So as I mentioned, the recipe follows the pattern of having a problem, following the steps in the book, and then sort of coming on the conclusion or the other side, which is the final project. So I'm going to show you right now what usually happens in this particular project. Right now we have a bunch of components, and all of those components are used in, or majority of them are used in many different parts of the Angular Cookbook. So in many different projects and recipes. So this one, for example, loads a lot of components, which is a Star Wars character component, which brings the films. Then we have a drag and drop component right here. And I'm actually going to show you it right here. So we have the JavaScript file loaded as well, and my breakpoints removed. There we go. And just to make sure we are playing this and maybe removing all the breakpoints as well. Play. So here right now we have, oh, it's got another one. Why? Okay, let's see.
It's fighting with.
I missed one. That's fine. So this one right now, as you see, we are trying to load some data, and this is just some dummy data. But if I go down, you're going to see that none of further JavaScript bundles are loaded. So all that you see right here, for example, the Star Wars component, the drag and drop, which is also built right in this in the Cookbook monorepository and is used in multiple projects as well. And then things like users list. And then this thing that you see when I hover, this is also one more component. So all of this is actually part of the main bundle right here. And when you look at the size of this bundle, which is right here, you're going to see that the size right here is 1.2 megabytes. This is huge. And when you have users who are using this on a slow network, or they don't have the right computing capacity, or using older phones, this is not cool to show to them everything. So ideally, what you would want to do is, even in Angular, to load the components when the user tries to go to that particular session. And that is what this new cool defer blocks allows us. So I'm going to show you it right here. So if I refresh now and maybe change this to fast 3G, you're going to see that I'm right now using the Star Wars character component. If I mouse over the size now, this has reduced from 1.2 megabytes to 12.8 KB. It's a 10 times decrease of the whole bundle size.
A smidge smaller.
Exactly, just a tiny bit small. But imagine this being obviously a real application that serves enterprise users, and it is out there for all the things, including SEO and real users using this. This would be really interesting to load the data or the component when you go to that. So if I scroll down, you're going to see that now we got the drag and drop component right here. And until that appears, you also saw a bit of a tiny loader there. This is while the component is being loaded. And this right now contains all the things related to, for example, you'll find in the file component, the folder component, all the definitions of the component should be right inside here. Here you go, the file component. And not only that you can go to load the data while you're scrolling, but you can also do that on interactions with the defer block. So I'm going to show you one more example. So if I scroll down, now we have loaded this users component. And since I'm throttling this, it's going to take a bit of time. Let's make it a bit fast one. And this is a bigger component. But not only you can do it while the user scrolls to that particular position, but also on interaction, as I said. So until I've hovered this card, I don't really want the component that should be there. So when I actually mouse over, that's when the new component comes in, and you can see that working right there. So this sort of having this whole experience and control is one of the things, or one of the recipes that Angular Cookbook covers. So it's really interesting to learn how this works behind the scenes and actually implementing that, and then having this in your pocket, because whenever you want to look at how to use defer, you go directly to the recipe and then look at it. And to be honest, I think I pick this book at least once a week because of the things that I don't really remember how to do. For example, just this week, I was working on some animations for a component library I was working on, and I wanted to see, okay, how do you really do the staggering animation? And I could just go to the book and pick an example right from there. So it's really handy to have on your shelf.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you have kind of like a summary of all the different types of recipes, or do you have like 5 favorite ones that you would want to share with folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Over, right?
I mean, I wrote it, so I love all of them, but I can talk about a few. I really like the last chapter, which talks about progressive web applications. And in that one, I also have a really nice game that is a dice, or a number guessing game. So a dice rolls with all the cool CSS animations. And then if you guess right, you get score and otherwise. So what I like really about the book is even if you don't look at anything from the book and you just go to the project and look at the project itself, there's so much to learn right from the project. And I could create a video about each project even, but I can still pick some and tell you which ones I really like. I have this recipe in chapter 9 where I talk about Angular and Angular CDK, and it's called Pointy Little Popovers with the Overlay API. So in that one, we create an overlay for a sort of menu drop down for each option, but it is also pointy. So that is something that you don't really get over the internet really easily, that when they sort of shuffle because of less lack of space, they point to the right direction. That was really nice. I also really like in Angular Forms, which is chapter 8, I have one recipe which allows you to work with form arrays. And that is an interesting one on how you dynamically create, add, and remove components. I also really like this defer one, I think. I think this is one of the coolest recipes to show. I also have some recipes in the chapter 10. No, it's actually chapter 12, performance optimizations in Angular. I think that's probably my favorite chapter. And in that one, I have this recipe, which is using web workers for heavy computation. So,
nice.
So we work with a really heavy function that is in the service, but we move that to web workers and works flawlessly. And it's really cool to see how much improvement we get in the app.
I don't think people have done enough with web workers, to be quite honest. I think it's challenging. There's like things like Party Town. I don't know if you've ever used that, but there's certain tools like that make it slightly easier, but like there's still so much more that's capable that I just don't think we're using regularly enough.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that pick. That's a good
one. Thank you. Awesome.
So what do you find will be like next? Is the 3rd version you've already started working on, or you're like, hey, I'm burned out, I need to take a pause before we start updating this thing again?
Yeah, me and my wife, we both decided that it's time. More, my wife decided it's time that I should take a break, because yeah, I had my whole calendar booked with slots when I would just sit to write Angular Cookbook, and it would be sometimes 5 a.m. in the morning. I usually wake up at 5, but sometimes also late till 10 or 11 p.m. But we decided that we're going to take a break. I'm not going to work on any video series or book till half past this year. Maybe starting from June, I can look into something. But I really wanted to, when I was working on the outline of the book, and even during working on the book, there was so many things that I wanted to put into the book, but they were too advanced, and I didn't want to scare the users or have the book, because I think this one has now 500 pages, and the previous one had 650 pages. So it was a really big book, and my first impression was, when I got the book, was like, are people going to buy this one because it's too big to carry? And yeah, I think now I want to have a slimmer book, but it's still with more powerful concepts and more advanced techniques. So I'm probably thinking of something that is not a second edition or third edition, but maybe a volume 2, or
Gotcha.
something that has more in it. Yeah.
Complementary kind of to these.
Yeah.
Nice. What are there versions of this so that like I'm a huge, like, I gotta search things. I don't actually like read end to end on books. Is there the capability to like go Kindle or like another electronic form that you can buy?
Yeah, so this is available both on paperback and also on Kindle. I think I got my copy just recently from the publisher. I had a really old Kindle that was third generation or something, and I broke the screen twice. So I got a new one now. But yeah, there's a Kindle version, and you can have it in your pocket all the time. So
Is there any other electronic forms of this too, through PDF or anything like that?
I think there's a PDF as well, and that I think you can get it, but I believe that has some sort of watermark or something.
Sure.
But it is available on PDF as well.
Cool. Well, I'll grab some links after the show, and we can add them to the post that goes out for people to snag those, and as well as the written form. I guess one last thought with kind of the introduction of, as you mentioned, the logo updates and Angular 17 and kind of the new Angular.dev. How do you kind of envision tying in together the newness of Angular as it starts to approach matching features on like Next.js and things like that, where server-side rendering's coming into play? Do you cover that, or is that kind of something in Angular that like that would be perfect for that volume 2 portion? Where do you see both Angular and like your vision of your book kind of colliding at?
That's a really good question. I think I want to go into more enterprise level architecture, and also like what is the recommendation and what to do and not to do, rather than small concepts. And that is going to be my take. And one of the things that I'm really excited about, and I saw this notification today, that TanStack is now supporting Angular, and I was really happy to see that, because I worked with React and Next.js for quite a while now, and I tried the SWJS, whatever that's called, but then also TanStack as well. And I think that's where things would be really interesting. And I think that with Angular, I think right now, I say it all the time, right now is the best time to get into Angular, because there's so much good happening within the whole framework, and there's so much excitement in the community, and the features that are coming in are super nice. And the whole developer experience, I always prefer Angular, even though I've worked with the React for the past 6 years, and I've tried other frameworks as well. But I think it's going in the right direction. I think it's going to still take some time. For example, the confusion between Angular IO, Angular Dev, the server-side rendering that we have, analog JS and the takes, and as you mentioned, like authoring format for the components. I think it's going to be really cool to see what Angular does in 1 year. And I think I'm going to be there for sort of covering the technical parts, which are more complex.
That's awesome. I'm super stoked for you. That's really cool. And I love that you're sticking with Angular. I know a lot of people have walked away from it, but even though like you're writing React, you're still kind of in that Angular community so much. So super awesome. All right, we're going to kind of take and flip the script, and we'll do our perfect picks now. So I will go first, give you a little bit of time to kind of get your mind around what you want to talk about. So I've been watching, oops, that's your screen. Let me add this one. There we go. I've been watching this show. I don't know why, like it popped up on Netflix. My son and I tend to watch House together. We just like like how Greg House acts, and how like the rhetoric kind of goes back and forth, but also trying to guess like what medical things are going on. He's pretty good at it. I think he's doing really well in his biology class too. So maybe there's some signs there. I'm not sure, but anyways, I started watching this Resident show, and I love the pacing of it. And so I've like already cruised through the first season, just like trying to fall asleep at night with something easy, which this is, but it still keeps me awake and interested too. So definitely check out The Resident. I believe all 6 seasons. Yeah, I think they're all out here. So
that's gonna keep everyone busy.
yeah, that's for sure. I usually don't get into like hour long or like 45 minutes since there's no commercial shows, but this one's really been interesting for me. So it's cool. All right, your pick is much more interesting than mine.
Yeah, so I think I saw, if I remember correctly, Santosh Yadav, who's also a GD, and he lives in Germany and is from India. So he mentioned this book, and I looked at it and I was like, okay, I think I should read it. And I have not been disappointed at all. There's so much good content in this book, and I've learned a lot. I've always tried to sort of aim myself for being an architect, but I also have wanted to look into the backend architecture much more for the past few years, and I think this was a really good start for me. I mean, even I have a bunch of full stack applications out there. I don't, as confidently I say I'm a front end architect, I don't say that for the backend so far, but I want to be there, and I think this was a really, really good for me. I have my cute little Kindle right now where I'm following this book every time I go to the office. My sort of path to office is about 2 hours in the train, so I get a lot of time to read. Yeah, but fortunately I go once a week, so that's
okay. That's a little better.
It's not too bad, and I actually prefer the long route because I can read quite a lot in that. So it's a really good book, I think, when it comes to architectural decisions and sort of just knowing what you can do in certain situations. I think is great, and I love one quote from the book that says there's no best practice, it's only which trade-off you pick. So yeah, everything is a trade-off.
Yeah, for sure. We always say there's pros and cons to everything, right? Yeah. Same thing. Okay. That's interesting. That's one of the things I really, really miss about being in Europe. And actually, when we were in Singapore, just public transit, how easy it is and how wonderful it is to like hop on a bus or a train and like you get there. And in the US, I feel like I have to still drive everywhere unless I'm in like Chicago or New York or a big city like that. So that's really nice that you have a little time to read.
Yeah. Can I maybe show you one thing if I can quickly find it? I want to show you one of the things that I really see people in Sweden complaining quite about is how bad the weather is, and commute and whatnot. But I want to show you one thing on why I appreciate what I have here, so to say. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is how I traveled. I mentioned going to the university and colleges. This is how I traveled 1.5 hours every day. And took 3 buses, and you can see that what's fascinating. This guy on the blue side, it's most likely that he is the person who collects money from everyone, and he actually goes to the top and moves around while the bus is running, and he remembers every single person how much he has to give the money back. So it's like quantum computing or something. I don't really know, but yeah, this is what I used to do, and there were so many uncertainties. What I liked, I say this like all the time, the fact that I know I'm going to leave at this time and reach the office by this time is a blessing for me. And I don't care about, if it's raining or if it's a snowy, I'm really happy. And I think the train or the infrastructure of Europe is really, really nice, including Singapore, of course. Yes.
Yeah. It's always shocking to me. It's like we were just looking, because I think I might be doing a talk in Italy in April, and I was just looking like, I wonder like what a train would cost to go from Bologna to Florence or something like that, and it was like, I don't know, $12 or something ridiculous. I'm just like, that can't even be possible. Like, I don't understand. Like, it's so cheap. It's amazing to me. But then we'll be watching a show about like Mumbai, and we see like people traveling like that, and I'm just like, how do people do it? And I think there's kind of like this expectation too that like, you know, if you're late because this is how we actually all get here, and we're accepting of that fact and things like that. So I don't know.
Exactly.
It's all kind of how people live and what you get used to and what you love. So
Exactly.
cool. Well, Mohammed, I really appreciate it. I think your book is amazing. I haven't read the whole thing yet. I've just got snippets and parts. So I plan on picking that up and hopefully diving back into the Angular side of the house a little bit more. That was my one true love too. So it was Ionic and Angular when I first started as well. So I'm
Absolutely.
looking forward to
And thank
getting
you.
back. And congrats on the second edition.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It was really nice meeting you, of course. And I hope to meet with you again.
Yeah, same. Sounds great. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.